What was your "holy cow, this is actually happening" moment? When I first got my own apartment, I received the keys 3 days before the move-in date, so I went there straight from the office. It was completely empty and just looked so clean with fresh paint and new carpet. And then I heard what I haven't heard in a long time: the complete silence. After a while, I noticed that I was actually grinning and started visualizing where everything would go, what I'd need to buy and what I should throw away, alternative configurations and options, and it was great. It got late and I ended up sleeping in the bedroom on the carpet with only my coat as a blanket, but I was so happy. The chance at a new beginning is a beautiful thing. Personal space and the ability to have quiet to oneself can do a lot of good for a person. Story 2. For 19 years, I was a fat kid. Then I finally lost weight, not in super good shape, but enough to run a half marathon when I was around 21. My weight went up and down for several years before I decided I needed to take my life seriously and really get healthy. The other day, I ran a 5-mile road race with a friend. This friend is in great shape and has been his whole life. I knew that if I could get past him, I could really call myself in great shape. We started the race and he took off ahead of me. I just couldn't keep up, and I remember thinking, this is bad. I really thought I could keep up with him. But he stayed in my view, and after 1.5 miles, I noticed he was closer. At 2.5 miles, I caught up to him. By 4 miles, I knew I had enough energy left to pass him. That moment when I thought, oh my god, I'm an actual athlete, felt so incredibly good. That's because the feeling of being a fat kid never really goes away. A few days after the race, I told a girl that I really liked her, but she didn't say much at the time. She didn't shut me out or lead me on, so I felt a bit lost. A few weeks later, I asked her if she wanted to go get coffee together. That afternoon coffee turned into us talking under the moonlight for hours. It was surreal and incredibly beautiful. She had a feeling that I liked her for a while, but it only became real for her. It became her "this is really happening" moment after I told her how I felt and how serious I was about her. She needed time to think about whether or not she was ready for a relationship, and luckily, by the time I asked her for coffee, she had an answer. Story 3. At the beginning of 2016, around New Year's, my family and I were driving back from my grandparents' house at night. It was raining and there was fog. We went around a corner and I felt the car start to skid. But my dad has always been a great driver, so I thought, he'll turn it back, no problem. Then we started rolling, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is really happening. I remember shouting a lot of, "no ways." It was like a scene from a movie, with the camera spinning and glass everywhere. I was listening to Lana Del Rey at the time. The next thing I knew, I was scrambling out of the car. I saw the door starting to smoke and thought the car might catch on fire, so I quickly jumped out with my little brother under my arm. Thankfully, we were all okay, but it was terrifying. It turned out we had skidded and went to a lamppost. Another time, at a music festival, I met a guy named Justin who had a really relaxed vibe. My girlfriend and I were dancing near his group for a while and we shared some stuff. I asked him, "Hey Justin, has anyone ever told you that you look exactly like Shia LaBeouf?" Without missing a beat, he said, "That's my name. My name is Shia LaBeouf. My publicist doesn't want people seeing me here doing all this stuff." For the next 4 hours, we hung out with him and his friends, and it was the most magical experience of my life. I added him on Snapchat, and the next day, I realized it was actually just some rich kid named Justin who looked and sounded like Shia LaBeouf. Story 4. When I had my first college hookup with someone I really liked. She was very attractive. She was a senior and I was just a sophomore. I started talking to her on a Wednesday, and by Saturday, we were in bed together. It was Halloween weekend and we were both very hammered, which made my confidence really high that night. I was wearing a Punisher costume that I made for Halloween, and I was proud of the muscle I had built. I had used the line, "I'm something stupid, do me," when she said she wanted to do something stupid that night, and it worked. Here's some background. I weighed 220 pounds at the end of my second semester of college because I'd gained 30 pounds, but I lost all the fat and gained muscle in about 2.5 months. For once, I felt confident and proud of my body. That moment is one I'll never forget. Even though things didn't work out with her, I was very proud of the person I'd become. 6 months before that, I was afraid to talk to my own shadow. I was very overweight and had a lot of issues. Now I'm confident, close to having the body I want, less sad, and I've worked through many of my issues. Just remember, nerds, that we can get the girl. It might take some time, but we do, eventually. Story 5. I was sitting in the front row at a WWE event, and the bad guy champion came up right to me, yelled in my face, and insulted me. When I saw this huge guy climb out of the ring, making eye contact and coming straight for me, I thought, holy cow, this is really happening. It was scary. I'll tell you more about this because people seem really interested. It was Kevin Owens. The main event was a match between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, and I was dressed like Sami because I usually dress like him anyway. Kevin called my group freaking losers early in the match, made fun of Sami Zayn's dancing, and made a rude gesture at my brother. Then at the end, he held up the championship belt and said to me, "You'll never have what I have. Enjoy being a loser forever." Story 6. One morning, I was walking down the street. It was very dark and with not many streetlights on. It was about 1:30 a.m. and extremely foggy. Overall, it wasn't a very comfortable night to be out walking. I was about 5 minutes away from where I was going when I could barely see a person walking towards me in a rather confrontational way. I'd like to say I wasn't scared, but I was. I thought, oh no, this is really happening. I'm going to be close enough for this guy to reach me in just a few hundred feet. I was going to cross the street to see if it was actually coming after me, but I decided to stay where I was and see what would happen. As we got within about 15 feet of each other, I decided to say something. I yelled, "Hello." He said hello back and kept going wherever he was going. In the end, I was very happy that I said hi to him. Another time when I was a young and silly kid, I used to play pranks on my sister. We kept the cat food on top of the refrigerator. Since I was small, I would climb onto the counter and stand on it to reach the cat food. One day, my sister was supposed to be watching me, but she was on the phone with her friend. For some reason, I decided to climb on top of the fridge instead of just reaching for the cat food. I managed to get up there and was on my hands and knees. When I tried to crawl forward with my right hand, the freezer door opened and I fell inside. As I was falling, I remember thinking, wow, I'm really falling right now. I landed on the floor and it got all the wind out of me. My sister was panicking because I could barely breathe at first. She thought she'd be in trouble for almost letting me hurt myself as a child. Story 7. I teach a special kind of yoga that uses the wall, which is special equipment and props to do different poses. It's really fun, very popular, and also very dangerous. If someone thinks they know more than I do, we're going to have a problem. I had a student who bragged about how much he weighed. He proudly said that he weighed 420 pounds that night. This was the first warning sign. He brought a friend to show off how agile he was for someone who was quite heavy. This was the second warning sign. He was taking a yoga teacher training course, which was a huge red flag. We were about to do a different kind of headstand where you hang upside down by just your wrists. I asked this guy to please not do this one. He didn't like that. He said he knew his body better than I did, that he was getting better training than I was, and that he thought he was strong enough. What happened next felt like it took both a long time and no time at all. He got his feet over his head. I quickly moved forward thinking I might be able to catch him. I wasn't fast enough, and he landed on his head with his belly and lower body on me. It took 5 other students to help me get out from under him. Surprisingly, he wasn't hurt. I was just winded and had a few bruises, but I was okay. And I banned him from my class. Story 8. I was working as event security, and I got a call to check out people arguing in the stands. The guy I was patrolling with and I went there. It was a man with his wife or girlfriend. We took them out of their seats and into the walkway area to find out what was going on. Then the man suddenly hurt the woman. He yelled it was all her fault and he just wanted to watch the game and he blamed her for what he had done. That was the first, holy cow, this is really happening moment. We put the man in zip ties. He followed us the whole way down to the security station while the woman followed quietly, crying a little but not saying much. We radioed ahead for the police to meet us there because it was a crime. When we got to the guard station, we explained everything to the cops. They took the guy out of the zip ties and started questioning him. Then they acted like they were going to let him go. The police were basically about to say it was a crime he said, she said situation and let him walk away. At the same time, the guy I was patrolling with and I started the citizen's arrest speech. This was the second, holy cow, this is really happening moment. Now about citizen's arrests. Depending on your state, it doesn't mean much more than the police have to at least take the person away from you. They don't have to charge them or arrest them, but they at least have to take control and document it. The year before, we had a lot of fights at the stadium with repeat offenders, and the chief of police made it clear that if we guards placed someone under citizen's arrest, he expected his officers to book them and let the district attorney decide if they would prosecute. He expected a 1-to-1 ratio in our reports to their arrest reports in those situations. We basically forced their hand. I have no idea if that guy ended up in trial, but he at least left in handcuffs that night. So she got at least one night to hopefully get away. Story 9. For 3 years, now 4, I was in a long-distance relationship with a guy I met online. We started as friends, became best friends, and then when our feelings grew too strong, we started dating. It was amazing. Even though we hadn't met in person, about 4 months later, he bought a plane ticket and flew to Chicago to see me. I woke up early, did my makeup, and put on a nice dress. I drove to the airport feeling an odd sense of calm, but once I got there, I started to panic. It finally got me that he was coming. I was so nervous, my heart was racing. Luckily, my best friend's boyfriend was there, joking around and recording the whole thing, which helped distract me. But the moment he stepped off the elevator, I ran to him without thinking and jumped into his arms. After 3 years of waiting for that moment, I was finally with him. Kissing him and smiling at him, it was everything I had ever dreamed of. I was expecting a catfish tale. Story 10. Meeting the love of my life in person was a big moment for me. A few years ago, I met a girl through my YouTube channel. I sometimes post music there, and she found my Facebook page because of it. Most people just friend me to compliment the music and then move on. But she actually wanted to have a conversation with me. We talked every day for a long time, and I fell in love with her. The only issue was that she lived in South Africa. I didn't think it would ever work out, but we loved each other. So we decided to try. We saved money for a year so I could travel to South Africa to see her. I stayed there for 3 months, and on the second day, I proposed to her. The day I had to leave was the hardest day of my life. I felt really sad for the next week, but then I knew it was time to get a job and stop being a lazy musician. I needed to bring her here with me. 2 years later, after spending a lot of money, she stepped off the plane and into my arms again. We've been married for a little over a year now, and I've never been happier. She's my everything. She encouraged me to record my first album. And even though it hadn't made me any money, it's a great feeling to have my music online for people to buy if they want to. Story 11. I was born in the early 1990s. I recently realized that I'm living in the future. When I look around, I see super thin TVs that can make you feel like you're actually in the scene. Virtual reality headsets don't just show you a different world. They make your body believe you're really there. Scientists are working on age-reversing medicines, and I know of one that's already being tested in humans. We have cars that can drive themselves or help the driver. Exoskeletons are being used for medical and military purposes. Artificial prosthesis lets amputees walk, pick things up, and even feel again. Laser eye surgery can fix people's vision problems. It's 2024 and 2027 is only 3 years away. 2032 is just 8 years away. When I was a young teenager, those years seemed so far off that they felt almost like they were from a story. Every day we'd take another step into the future. What do you think it will be like? I've been thinking about keeping a journal and writing down my predictions about the future, and when the time comes, I can compare what really happens to what I thought would happen. Story 12. My 21st birthday was an adventure. I flew back to Australia from England, and things didn't go as planned. The day before my birthday, the flight from London to Abu Dhabi was okay, but the flight from Abu Dhabi to Sydney was delayed because a man might have had a medical emergency on the plane. I missed my connecting flight from Sydney to Melbourne, which was the last one before the airport curfew. I had to book the first flight in the morning and only got 3 hours of sleep in a hotel. On my birthday, as we were about to land in Melbourne after a 1-hour flight, the pilot told us we had to go back to Sydney. The fog in Melbourne hadn't cleared and we couldn't land. A 24-hour trip turned into a 37-hour journey. I didn't want to get on another plane after that. My boyfriend bought me a skydiving ticket 2 days later. Story 13. One time I almost got into an accident with an 18-wheeler truck. It was snowing heavily and I wanted to call in sick to work, but my boss had already said he would fire anyone who didn't show up that day, and he didn't like me much. Even though my parents both told me to stay home, I left for work. As I got close to a stop sign and put the brakes way before the sign, I realized my car wasn't stopping. It was sliding onto the highway and I could see an 18-wheeler coming straight at me. I tried really hard to stop the car using the emergency brake and pressing the brake pedal over and over, but the car wouldn't stop. I was wearing a lot of layers because of the cold and I was panicking so much that I couldn't undo my seatbelt to get out. I just watched the truck coming at me, struggling with my seatbelt and feeling my throat tighten as I thought, oh no, this is really happening. That truck is going to go onto me. I'm going to end. By some miracle, my car stopped just in time. The truck zoomed past me, not even a foot away from my car. After it was gone, I gently pressed the gas, drove across the rest of the highway, and pulled over. I cried uncontrollably for the next 20 minutes before I could call work and yell at one of the managers that my life was more important than keeping a low-paying job with a boss who was a narcissistic guy. That is completely uncalled for by that boss. Story 14. I was in a band that did pretty well, but I left to work on my own music. My last big tour was with my all-time favorite band, and they were huge stars. This was the band I grew up listening to. They influenced who I am as a musician. I got to play on the same stage as them every night. On the last night of the tour, we all hung out with the band. It was an amazing time just relaxing with them. At one point, my friend and I stepped outside for a smoke, and he turned to me with the biggest smile. I realized I had the same smile on my face. We spent the rest of the night getting hammered and talking about all sorts of things with our idols. It was one of the greatest moments of my life, something I could only dream of when I was young. Story 15. Getting a job in the game industry wasn't my original goal. I was finishing an associate's degree in fine arts at a community college, heading toward becoming a starving artist. Then I decided to try something different, becoming a game artist. I had nothing to lose except a lot of debt and a degree that might not lead to a job. I found a school with a mentorship program, which gave me a chance to see how I do in the real world. In my final year of school, the mentorship program accepted only 3 applicants out of 35 eligible students. I was one of 7 chosen to interview, and I got in. That was the first hurdle cleared. I started at the company as an intern. The art director made it clear that the interns rarely got hired, but I worked extra hours and made sure my work was the best it could be, using what I'd learned in school. I put more effort into that internship than I had into my senior classes. I wanted to see how I compared to current industry professionals. At the end of my internship, as I was preparing my portfolio for the Game Developers Conference, or GDC, I got called into the art director's office. They offered me a temporary artist position. Of course, I said yes. I wanted the permanent job, but getting my foot in the door was a start. 3 months into my temp job, I was doing basic work like creating props, crates, barrels, tents, but I made sure each thing I made was better than the last, always improving. And something big happened. A producer tapped me on the shoulder on Wednesday, out of nowhere. I knew who she was, but we'd never spoken. My first thought was that I was in trouble and they were going to let me go. She walked me into the art director's office and immediately said, "Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Actually, it's quite the opposite." I'll never forget that moment. They offered me a contract for a full-time salary position. They wanted me to be a permanent part of the team. Coming home that night and telling my mom, hugging her and crying, was the biggest moment of my life. I couldn't believe I'd get to do what I loved for a living. I've been at the company for almost 2.5 years now, and I love every minute of it. It was the best decision I ever made. Story 16. When I was young, I was playing video games in the living room. My dad was a police officer, and he had the day off because it was a holiday. But he got called into work because there was a bad accident in the highway. The police car that went to help got into an accident, and now the interstate was completely stopped. A couple of hours later, a big, friendly man came to our house. He seemed a bit surprised to see me. He asked to talk to my mom. When she came over, the man told her that my dad had been in an accident and was at the hospital. When we got to the hospital, it still really didn't sink in. I thought, this can't happen to my dad, right? I imagined he'd be like Officer McClane, just sitting on the side of the bed with his arm getting his medical attention. I thought, oh, it's just a small accident on the side of a highway. Why don't you come help us clean it up? It'll be fun. We'll have coffee and donuts later. Yum, cop food. But after waiting in the waiting room for half an hour, the doctors let my mom and me see him. When we walked into the room, he was shaken and bruised. He was covered in bandages and he had a swollen eye that was as big as a baseball. His teeth were stained red. He could barely look over at us because he was wearing a neck brace. I couldn't think of anything to say. I just stood there, looking at him. I was in shock, thinking, this can't happen, but it did? Well, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 17. 2 years ago, I found myself in a very dark place. I was 17 floors up, standing at my balcony railing, completely sober, with no clear memory of how I ended up there. My hands were gripping the railing tightly and a cigarette was between my fingers. I looked down, trying to find a reason not to jump. In the end, the thought of what it would do to my friends stopped me. We had already gone through 2 experiences in the previous 2 months, along with an accident from a car not long before. And then there were my cats. Who would take care of them? The good thing about hitting rock bottom is that the only direction left to go is up. I decided to pull through my challenges and pull myself out of that dark place. It's still a challenge sometimes, but things are better now. A great moment came last September. I got into my friend's car at 6 a.m. on a rainy Saturday. After weeks of planning and booking our stay, our trip was finally happening. We crossed the border into the United States for the first time in almost 15 years. We had a wild night in Portland and then drove south along the coast. It was beautiful, and the sunset was amazing. We stopped in Eureka for the night and then headed to San Francisco. A few days later, more friends joined us, and we made our way back to the coast. We even slept on the side of the highway in the middle of nowhere one night. The next day, we ventured into the Mojave Desert in a sandstorm. After waiting in line for 6 hours, getting blasted by sand the whole time, we made it into the festival. It felt like coming home. 4 days in what felt like a post-apocalyptic wasteland were the best time of my life. I met so many new people, watched my friend compete in gladiator events and saw people battle it out in a full-size Thunderdome. Being Canadian, we brought maple syrup, ketchup-flavored chips, and crow feathers, which people loved. The only bad part was the cold I caught on the way down. I'm planning to go back this year and every year after that. Story 18. In August 2015, I got my first regular job, working from 9 to 5. Before that, I had fallen for a few scams and was feeling pretty desperate. Got a haircut, started wearing glasses again, and even lied on my resume to improve my chances. Eventually, one place offered me a job. The interview was with a blonde, chubby woman and her boss, an old man who looked like he had seen better days. The interview went well. Actually, it was great. I was even making jokes, which I was too scared to do in previous interviews. 2 weeks later, they called me to say I got the job. The job itself was easy. Too easy. Most of the work was done by the blonde woman, and even then, I could have done it much faster. There was tension between the blonde and the old man. Even though I was new and didn't know much, I understood the most important rule of office behavior. Avoid conflicts at all costs. The blonde woman didn't seem to get that. To make a long story short, just 2 weeks into my new job, I watched as the woman who hired me got fired. It happened because she didn't get the right speakers in time and had a big argument with her boss, both online and in person. Story 19. Last Sunday night, around 11:30 p.m., I woke up to some strange noises coming from my living room. There were loud noises and other sounds. At first, I thought it was just my kin playing around, which she does sometimes, but I decided to check it out anyway. So I grabbed my weapon. With my weapon in one hand and my cell phone's flashlight in the other, I went to the living room. I checked all the doors and windows to make sure everything was okay. My cat was acting a bit weird, but I was tired and just wanted to go back to bed, so I didn't think much of it. When I got back to bed, I couldn't fall asleep. About 15 or 20 minutes later, I heard those noises again. As I sat up in bed, I noticed a light coming from under our bathroom door. There's a window in the bathroom, so I grabbed my weapon and phone again, opened the bathroom door, and walked to the window. I moved the blinds aside and saw a guy trying to pry my window open. I couldn't believe it was happening. It felt like a dream. All I could think about was that my family was right there in the room with me, my wife and her toddler. This guy knew someone was home. He must have seen me walking around with a flashlight earlier when I was checking the house. So there I was, face to face with this guy, not even 2 feet away from me. I pointed my weapon at him and told him to stay where he was. I took out my phone and called 911. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, the guy ran to the Arcadia sliding glass door and threw a rock at it, a rock as big as a softball. Incredibly, the rock bounced off the door. I calmly told the dispatcher, "There's an attempted break-in happening right now. He's trying to get through my glass door by throwing a rock at it. If it gets in, my family's in the bedroom and I'm afraid for our lives. I will hurt him if he enters my house." I gave the dispatcher my address and they said, "I understand. You need to protect your family. Do what you have to. Officers are on their way and we'll be there in 3 minutes." I left the bathroom, went to the living room, opened the blinds to the sliding glass door and turned on all the outside lights. The guy had already left. The police arrived and walked through the backyard. I met them in the back porch and we looked around the house. The guy who tried to break in had damaged several window screens leading to the master bedroom. The Arcadia sliding door had a big crack in it and the rock was sitting next to it. I never thought something like this would happen to me, but it did. And I can say for sure that I would have hurt him without hesitation if he had entered my house. The police didn't find the guy, but the very next day I had a security system installed in my home. Now I can sleep a little easier at night. Story 20. I was my sophomore year in high school and I decided to join the theater program because it seemed really fun and exciting. I was part of the freshman class, and there was this girl in the class who I thought was really pretty. I wasn't very confident because I wasn't liked much by the popular group, so I never thought I'd have a chance with her. As time went by, we were paired up for a project, which gave me an excuse to talk to her. We worked well together and got to know each other a bit. I learned that she was a Ukrainian and had moved to the United States when she was young after her mother married someone so they could live here. After we finished the assignment, I wanted to talk to her more, but didn't want to seem creepy. After a few months, a new freshman joined our class and we quickly became friends because we had similar personalities. I found out that he was friends with a Ukrainian girl, so now we were hanging out together more often. I finally had the chance to talk to her and get to know her better. The more we talked, the cooler she seemed. Her friend told me that she thought I was cute, but I didn't believe him. However, after that, I noticed her looking at me more often. She became more comfortable around me and shared personal things, like how her past boyfriends were not nice to her and how her stepfather was a creep. I wasn't sure if she liked me romantically or if she just wanted to be best friends. When the first school dance at the end of the first quarter was coming up, I had to make a decision. Ask her out or let the opportunity pass. I decided it was time to be brave and ask her. On the night of our homecoming game, I was looking everywhere for her. I asked her friends where she was, but they didn't know. Time was running out. The game was ending with everyone heading to the dance. My heart was racing and I was full of adrenaline. I had so much confidence. For 10 minutes until the dance started, I still couldn't find her. I asked her classmates where she might be. 7 minutes left. Near the bathroom, outside, she was nowhere to be found. With 5 minutes left, I thought if she didn't show up, I'd just go home. I was getting really worried. and one of her friends told me to turn around. There she was, looking amazing, all dressed up. I think she was hoping I would ask her to the dance. I walked up to her slowly, tapped her shoulder, and when she turned around, I took a deep breath and asked her if she wanted to go to the dance with me, as a couple. It felt like time stopped. Her face lit up with excitement, and she said, very shyly, yes. Story 21. I worked really hard on building my resume, doing volunteer work and becoming a pharmacy technician so I could apply to a physician assistant master's program. It took me 3 years after finishing my undergraduate degree to get everything ready, because I had student loans and bills to deal with. The moment I realized all my hard work was paying off was after I was rejected by the top school in my area. I was actually proud of myself for even getting an interview there. Then I got a call at work offering me the very last spot in another PA program I had applied to and interviewed for. Another big moment was when my genetic counselor called to tell me that I also have Lynch syndrome, which I inherited from my mother. And then there was the time I finally found the courage to break up with my ex-boyfriend after we had been having problems for a while. Just 3 weeks later, I met the love of my life, and we'd been together for 5 amazing years. I knew I loved him the moment we met. We started dating just 10 days later. Story 22. One day on my way home from work, I saw an old man who had collapsed at a bus stop. He looked like he was having a seizure, so I stopped my car to check on him. As I got closer, I saw a lot of red liquid around him, and he was unconscious. I noticed he was wearing a medical alert bracelet that said he took vasodilators. My mother was with me, and she started to panic. I could see the man was having trouble breathing, and I realized he might be fading. That was my holy cow, this is really happening moment. I quickly told my mother to call the police and to keep people away, especially the kids who were starting to come home from school. As I was shouting out information like the time, where we were, and what was happening with the man, I started to use the first aid training I had learned just the week before. I rolled him over to start CPR. He had no pulse, and doing CPR for 10 minutes was really hard for me because I'm not very big. The whole time I was praying for him. Finally, the ambulance arrived. The paramedics worked around me while I kept going with the CPR. They took over and used a defibrillator on him. After a few minutes, he had a pulse again. It was such a relief to know he was going to be okay. The hospital sent me an email later to tell me he was fine. I'm really grateful that I was there to help, and it showed me how important first aid training is. It helped me stay calm and in control. And I'm not sure I would have been able to do that without the training. Story 23. Last night was really tough. I was making cookies because I had just gotten some nice cookie sheets for my birthday. I heard my best friend and roommate upstairs, screaming into the phone at her girlfriend. That wasn't too unusual, but the girl she's with now is really great, and I've never heard her scream like that at her before. Only at her best friend, it was kind of crazy. I decided to leave it alone, but then she started screaming my name, so I ran upstairs. Her girlfriend travels out of state for 2 weeks at a time because she's a live-in nurse. This time, her patient got really sick and was in the hospital, probably not going to live much longer, so the company put her in a hotel until they knew what was going to happen with the patient and they'd send her home. My roommate and I had just come back from looking at houses to find a place for her and her girlfriend to live after her lease is up. I had cookies in the oven and dough in my hands when her girlfriend called to say goodnight. She'd gone to Chili's for dinner and had a few drinks, and she was outside her hotel room smoking when she called. A man who had been watching her smoke followed her up to her room, knocked on the door, forced his way in, and mistreated her. There was nothing I could do but try to calm my roommate down. I had to tell her over and over, "No, you can't go to her right now. The next flight is tomorrow and it costs $1,500. No, you can't call her right now even though you want to. She's with the hospital staff and the police. Please stop panicking. The neighbors will call the police if you don't stop." This went on for 5 hours. At the end, I did something that might not have been the best idea, but I thought it was necessary. I gave her some drinks to help her calm down. When she finally passed out on the couch, I grabbed some cushions and a blanket and slept on the floor next to her. Today, we picked up her girlfriend from the airport, and I'll finally be able to get some real sleep. Still can't believe this happened. You don't really understand pain until you see someone else going through something so terrible that you're not sure you could handle it yourself. There's nothing you can do to help them. Story 24. My girlfriend at the time, who is now my beautiful and loving wife, and I were lying in bed talking about having a baby and what we would name our hypothetical child. She was convinced she couldn't get pregnant because she had been in an 8-year marriage before me and never had a scare. So we both went to bed with heavy hearts, thinking it wasn't possible. The next day, around 4 or 5 in the evening, I took her to the emergency room because she was recovering from a clot in her lung, and I thought she might have pneumonia. It's always better to be safe than sorry. After some time, as they were running their tests, the doctor came in and said, "Did you know you were pregnant?" My girlfriend was like, "But I can't get pregnant. It's not possible." The doctor explained there's a specific hormone they test for in the ER and then asked if she wanted to go for an ultrasound. She said she wanted to wait for me and have the test done again. I was outside smoking when this was happening. When I came into the little ER room she was in, her eyes were as big as dinner plates. She told me to sit down because she had something to tell me. I asked her what it was, and then something just tickled my heart. That's the best way I can describe it. I half-stated, half-asked, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" She then told me what the doctor had already said. We went down to the ultrasound, and he confirmed that she was indeed pregnant and had been for 62 days. That was in 2014, and now we're the proud parents of a little baby girl. She has changed our lives in ways that are so profound and complete that I can't put it into words. My moment was when I saw that little baby come into this world. It was a "holy cow, this is happening" moment. But it was also a "dear God, wow" moment. You never know what you're going to wake up to. Story 25. I had just made a right turn at the stop sign. This road had 2 lanes on either side. I'm a stickler for the rules of the road, so I turned into the right-hand lane, then merged into the left, because I was going to be making a left turn shortly. I should note that the road I was on had a cement divider in the middle that ended at least 20 meters away from the stop. I merged, then had a brief moment, i.e. probably 3 to 5 seconds. My brain finally processed the fact that there was a car coming right at me in my lane. I merged back into the right lane, and watched as this car finally reached the end of the divider and merged back onto the proper side of the road. As I said, there was a cement divider along this road, and it started at the next intersection over. From my point of view, this means that this person somehow made an illegal turn to the right-hand side of the stretch, or was somehow already on the wrong side when they turned onto it. The worst part is, I actually saw pretty much the exact same situation a few days or weeks later. This time, I was headed in the same direction as the offending driver, so I was on the proper side of the divider, and the driver was ahead of me. Story 26. When I met my ex-girlfriend, she was determined to join the army and had decided not to be in a relationship when she left. For 11 months, we were in this weird stage where we were together but not officially together. She refused to tell me she loved me, even though I knew she did because she thought it would make it too hard for her to leave. Finally, she was accepted into the army. Her long-standing knee injury had been holding things up, but now it was certain that she was leaving. I guess I didn't react the way she wanted when she told me the good news. I explained to her that while she was making it easier on herself but not making us official, it made it harder for me. I was always wondering if my feelings were one-sided and if she had ever loved me, using me just to pass the time. After 30 minutes of silence, there was a knock on my door. She said, "I love you." We had 3 wonderful years together, but eventually the distance was too much for her. We've been apart for 2 years now, and although things didn't end well for a while, I have no regrets. I got everything I wanted from that relationship. Story 27. I'm a volunteer firefighter, and in 2013, my area experienced severe flooding. There was only one bridge crossing the river near where I live, so after I responded to emergencies and the water levels rose, I was unable to get back home. That night, around 24 of us were sleeping on the floor of the fire station because there were no beds. It's all volunteer run. We'd worked all day trying to control the river, which had become incredibly large and powerful. Normally, the river flows at about 4 to 5 cubic meters per second, which is around 1,000 to 1,300 gallons per second. But during the floods, it reached a peak of 560 cubic meters per second, nearly 150,000 gallons per second. The town where the fire station is located has a 3-kilometer-long earthen berm that protects it from the river. At about 2:30 in the morning, the crews that had taken over for us at 11 p.m. so we could rest were banging on the station doors to wake us up. The berm had been damaged. They estimated we had about 30 minutes before it would break and let the entire river flow into the town. We'd already evacuated all the civilians. There were about 1,500 people in town. But now we had to evacuate ourselves from the fire station, which felt like a second home to me. I joined the department in 1991 and had been on thousands of calls. We all rushed through the station, taking things off the walls, grabbing computers and other electronic equipment, packing up protective gear for other crews, and gathering station supplies. Everything that wasn't bolted down and even some things that were. We loaded everything into the fire trucks, leaving just before 3 a.m. for the local elementary school, which was on top of a hill and safe from the water. I was certain that by sunrise, the station, my sister's house, my colleagues' houses would all be gone. For 5 days, we operated out of the school, which we took over as our temporary fire station. We slept on gym mats and did what we could. The berm, it eroded down from over 100 feet wide in most places to just a few spots where only 4 inches of dirt were left between the river and the town. We were incredibly lucky. Since then, we've rebuilt the berm with cement and huge rocks to make it stronger. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.